Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cash Flow Positive. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when you buy the wrong property, primarily wrong short term rental property. So, I work with a bunch of people who, most of my clients who are back for or want to use me, usually have bought the wrong property on the first go around. And there's a number of reasons why. It could be they didn't do enough research. They didn't know what they were looking for. They were kind of sold into something or misled into a bad property. A big one that we see pop up a lot are underestimating expenses, or overestimating revenue. But usually the expense one's pretty killer, and that still pops up a lot. And so there's just a number of reasons why a property just isn't working out. And the problem, though, that I'm noticing from a lot of folks, even people who bought properties today, that were hoping that it was going to do more, or the expenses weren't just going to be as bad as what they are currently, are kind of struggling. And the problem is, people are seeing this like kind of as like a stock, like the investment of real estate, like a stock, meaning like, oh, it's not making any money, I need to cut it and move on. And I think that we have to look at a bunch of different, different, I don't know what the term for this would be, different like benefits, or like, yeah, like weighing the pros and cons of actually actually selling a short-term rental. Like, what are the pros and cons of selling an underperforming short-term rental property? And that's what I want to talk about on today's episode, because I'm seeing some people prematurely try to sell their properties or get out of their properties because they might not be performing like they were expected. But because short-term rentals are very subjective, usually there's a way to turn it around. And I think that that's really that should be evaluated before you consider selling. So what we're going to talk about, what we're going to dive in today, is not necessarily why properties are, have gone bad or wrong, but what you should do if you're in a situation where your property is underperforming, and really how to analyze and understand your options. I think that's very important. So I'm going to try to not necessarily, I'm going to use some real examples, but I'm going to obviously leave out names, probably even markets too, because I think that kind of scares people. But of different examples I have, that I know people who are underperforming than originally expected, and ways that they can, like counsel I've given them and advice I've given them. Because most of the time, especially really in most of the markets, it very, very rarely, and I'm like, yeah, you need to sell and get out. Like, that's very rare that I end up saying, hey, sell that property and get out of there if you can. And just most of the time, there's something fixable that they can do and still benefit from having that property. So number one of the biggest things, obviously people are doing this, and if you're listening to this podcast, you want to cash flow. You want to cash flow positive with your short-term rentals. And, basically the profit at the end of the year, you want to have profit. And so a property that's underperforming is not profiting, right? It's not cash flowing. And so the first gut reaction that I hear people have is, it's not making any money, I need to cut it and move on. But you need to remember, and this is something a lot of those people, they fail to like connect the dots on with this, is they fail to remember that even though the property's not cash flowing anything, you're still getting tax benefits from the power of depreciation. You're also getting appreciation of the asset as well, and technically equity pay down, meaning you're paying down the mortgage, which increases your equity into that property, which gives you more, essentially selling power to roll into other funds. And so selling a property that is literally not making you any money after year one, I think is a mistake. Now, it depends on how much money it's losing. There's a lot of variables here. So, please give me the benefit of a doubt as I'm walking through this. But I'm just trying to say, like, consider these things before you go in full on panic mode. Okay. Because I just like, if you hold on to a property for 5 years, it's pretty much guaranteed. That's loose. It depends, obviously, when you bought and everything in the current market. But 5 years, we'll say even 10 years. Let's say 10 years. Okay, I know, well, that's probably pretty far away, but 5 to 7 years, it will appreciate over time. Okay. I don't think that we saw any crazy housing prices recently that are just going to be top of the market and will never reach that tier again. I just don't think, because there's such a housing shortage going on. People don't understand that. I think there's like 5 million, we're like short 5 million homes in the United States. And so housing prices could come down a little bit, but they're not going to drop significantly. So a lot of your appreciation, yes, we benefited from that COVID appreciation, that markup, and we're probably not going to see that for a little bit. But your home will continue to appreciate, maybe 1 or 2%, but that's still 1 or 2%. So in your calculation for how much money you're losing, like if you're just breaking even, the depreciation from all, your taxes, and then the appreciation side might actually make that property, obviously, not just break even, but be a somewhat decent investment, not necessarily a home run, but something that you're not going to, in the big picture, lose money. But as soon as you sell that property for, the same amount as you bought it, and then you have to pay all the fees, the realtor commissions and all the other closing costs and everything, and you lose 7 to 8, 9, to even 10%, you lock in your losses. And so by holding, we can ride the waves of the ups and the downs. Okay. So now it's a different story if the property is going negative, though, right? Like if you're losing money on a monthly basis or a yearly basis on a particular property, then it depends on how much money you're losing, right? Yes, you can deduct that money from your income, but for your taxable income, right? So you're still getting some benefit from that. However, you're technically losing money on it. So is there any good appreciation coming from that property? I mean, some markets are still really, really appreciating well. So don't undermine the tax savings and the appreciation when you're either just breaking even or maybe losing a little money. Like there's still value there. Now, if you're losing, 5, 10, or that's probably pretty extreme, but like, probably more than $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Yeah, it probably, now you're in a little bit different bucket. But before you just go, I'm losing money, I have to sell this property, you really, really, really need to critique the property first. Number one, is there anything that you can do to improve the property's performance as a short-term rental? We know that short-term rental revenue is subjective, meaning it is obtained by, number one, our pricing, number two, the listing itself, and then number three, the guest experience, essentially our hospitality, right? So ratings, reviews, how the experience went. And so all three of those things really make up what potential revenue a property can do beyond just its location and amenities and size and so on. So you have to evaluate those three things. And this is really hard for people. I think a lot of people come in and they're like, well, I'm a good host, and it's like, cool, but how's your pricing? Oh, I've got a revenue manager. Okay, number one, are they doing their jobs? And then number two, is it something else? Is it the listing? Is it this? Is it that? Maybe it's simply you're missing amenities that are really important in the market. I've had some clients in the past where, we told them, look, you need to add these certain things to be successful. And they didn't add them. And guess what? They weren't successful. Is that a shocker for anyone? No, it's not. It's do what we tell you to do and you can find success. And then we have clients who've, added certain amenities and frankly have tried, but they're not successful. And then we look at it and we say, hey, your pricing is off, big time off. Like you're thinking you can charge these ridiculous rates, but the reality is the market is not supporting that right now. Charge this. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 bookings start coming in and they're like, oh, problem solved. And, no, there's no more complaints. And so you have to analyze your property. And I think the biggest part here is taking off that hat of like the proud owner, right? We have to take that hat. It's really hard to do because you put a lot of sweat in probably some tears, into this property, frustrations. That's probably the biggest one, right? Maybe you've dealt with contractors or whatever. You put a lot into the property. And I think that you have to sometimes take a step back and look at it from a third party approach. That effort and energy you put all into that property, it is considered a sunk cost, meaning something that's in the past and in the past. However, you you should value that even in the, in terms of like what can I do to improve the property? What else can I do? And you should be constantly asking this question every so often, at least once a quarter. What should I do? What's my plan for the future? Not just today and forever. I mean, there's always properties entering into the market. The competition is always heating up. And so we want to stay a step ahead. It's a business, okay? Marketing and all this other stuff, it applies. And so I recommend asking someone to review your property. Give me your honest feedback about the property. What can I do to improve the property? And you might be surprised what they tell you. They'll either tell you something about pricing, or they'll tell you something about the listing itself. Usually the listing is the most common one. And then, it's something obvious in the ratings or the reviews. And so getting a third party's opinion, I think, is absolutely key when we're evaluating what we need to do. We shouldn't just make split second decisions. Oh, I need to sell, because usually there's something we can do to improve the property and make it better. Now, is that going to make us, thousands of more dollars? Probably not, but it might allow us to simply just break even. And then once again, breaking even on top of the appreciation and the tax savings and all these equity pay down, it's actually a decent investment for real estate. You have a lot of long-term rental real estate investors doing that today, where they're basically buying properties that are covering themselves, from a tenant standpoint, and they're just holding on to it from the appreciation side. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned that I'm sure just popped into your head. Well, Kenny, long-term rentals are passive income and short-term rentals are active. And that is 100% correct. So we do need to value our time. And if a property isn't, is taking up a lot of our time and not making us any money, then yeah, that's a problem, right? But you got to ask yourself this question and be honest. Is that property actually taking up a lot of your time? And like when I say a lot of your time, like sure, you get on Airbnb once in a while, but do you honestly spend more than 2 hours a week looking at improving the property? Probably not. Or like dealing with concerns on the property. Now there might have been a big recent concern you had to deal with, but consistently, are you spending that much time on the property? Probably not, right? So it's active income and you do have to spend time on it, but you're probably not spending that much time on it, right? And so I think that needs to be not under, I'm only spending 2 hours a week and I need to definitely get my money back. Therefore, I should sell the property. You're going to lock in your losses. I think for a lot of people, it makes sense to just hold, find ways to improve the property, break even, maybe make a little bit of profit from it, learn. Okay. That's a big one too, is the lessons of learning. But then, take that experience to better yourself in the future. Not every property is going to be a win. Okay. Not every property is going to be a win. I work with a lot of experienced investors, and I'm friends with a lot of experienced investors. And I can tell you right now, most, if not all of them, have some sort of like failure story, usually a big one, like, oh, wow, like this property is negative, and like one that they've, maybe gotten rid of before, or they still have it or whatever, but it's like one that just like wasn't performing like they had hoped. And so it's common. So don't like necessarily, you're not a failure overall. It's just learning lessons, right? So if it's breaking even or losing a little bit of money and there's ways to improve it, I would do that. And that's where most people fall, believe it or not. Most people aren't like losing tons of money on their properties. They're just not making as much as they had hoped. Okay. But don't undervalue the other things I just talked about. Now, there are people who are losing a lot of money on some of their properties, over $2,000 a month. And in my opinion, yeah, it might make sense to sell if you can sell it, even if you have to, unfortunately, sell it at a loss. but I would strongly encourage people to make it through at least, a year and a half before trying to sell the property, and also being strategic when you sell it. So I had a client come to me and she's like, I'm not making any money. And I looked at her property and I was like, look, to be fair, this hasn't even had a full year yet. And when you launched it was bad timing. You didn't update the photos. Like there was just like a bunch of little things that contributed to why it wasn't performing what we expected it to do. And I was like, we haven't really given this a fair go. You know what I mean? Like I'm looking at this and I'm like, there's a lot of ways to improve this. And you're telling like the timing of when you launched it and when you put professional photos up 4 months in, and when you did some updates and improve this or that. It's just like it was just like scattered. And I'm like, and then there was a natural disaster that happened, and there was all these, and I'm like, you dealt with these things, and that obviously impacted your revenue. And I was like, if you just add in the month that you lost from the natural disaster, that's an extra, $20,000 for that market, for that particular property. Like you'd be doing more than breaking even at that point. And so then the conversation starts to change. And so it's like having that third party perspective, I think is so valuable when you're trying to make that decision of whether you should cut a property loose. If this person goes through another year and it's the exact same results and they've tried to make improvements. And I didn't even say another year. I said 6 months. I said, we're headed into peak season right now. Why would you try to sell something when you're about to make all your money? I'm like, I guarantee you, you're going to be singing a different tune in 6 months from now. You're going to be like, hey, this was like the best investment ever. Give it a full go, give it a full try, and let's see what it comes out with when it's got everything going for it, not when you're just uploaded new photos, you've just done this, you've just changed your price, you just started doing revenue management, like all these things. It's like, come on, let's give it a full college go, a try, right? And make sure that we're actually giving the property the effort it deserves, and let's see how it does. And I guarantee you, it will perform better. And so I think that just taking the step back and analyzing what we need to do and to improve it, taking our like ownership hat off from a sense of like pride, and having a third party come in and give an unbiased opinion will help us know. But even then, sometimes we buy properties that just don't make sense at all, and we have to sell them. That's okay. Learning lesson, right? But before you lock in your losses, okay, always try to get somebody to come in and say, hey, what can I do to improve? Sometimes you have to invest a lot of money, and then you have a decision to make. Is that, if I invest a bunch of money into this property, is that ROI worth it, to invest all that money? Or is that just going to make me break even? Is it better to just hold that money, take the loss, and move on? Sometimes it's better to do that, okay, rather than like fight a current that's not worth fighting. So I really think it depends. And what do you do when you buy a bad property? Just take a step back, get someone else to help evaluate it, somebody experience. And maybe it's a couple of people, maybe it's not just one person, but just get people to look at it and to give their feedback. And if anything glaring stands out that maybe you missed, there probably is. And then give it a few months trying the new stuff and adapting. And if nothing changes, then you have more confidence in knowing like, hey, I should probably sell this thing. So take that feedback and then make decisions. Don't just blindly emotionally say, I'm done, this thing's not making any money, I'm out. Make those decisions, but don't just sit on it for another year and lose a bunch of money either. Like give it at least 4 to 6 months and then take action. So do that, and maybe you'll figure something out. I can't tell you how many times I've found people who bought something, complained it didn't make any money, and then they tweaked one thing. All of a sudden, boom, it's cash flow positive. And they're like, well, actually, yeah, it was that one thing. It changed everything for me. And so they could have lost a lot of money, but now they're making money. And it's just simply education. And like I said, taking that owner hat off, that pride hat off, and just saying, hey, somebody else, give me some honest feedback. What can I do to improve, beyond just like, adjusting my photo order? And if you do that, most people will be able to cash flow positive in almost any market. So think like that, and then also learn from some of the decisions you made as well, and on the next purchase. On the next episode of Cash Flow Positive, I'm bringing somebody who lost money on a property or was losing money on a property because they overestimated revenue in one of my favorite markets. And they turned it around, and they're going to share. And this is a very, very saturated market, one of the most saturated markets in the entire Airbnb or short-term rental space in the United States. And they turned it around in this market, and they're going to share with you how they personally did it and what they learned from it and what you can learn from it. So I will see you. I hope you enjoyed this episode first off, and I will see you on the next episode of Cash Flow Positive.